Hello everyone and welcome to an in-depth session on coordinates material expression in Unreal Engine. This powerful category of nodes manipulates spatial relationships, drives texture mapping and creates effects that react to position, orientation and scales within your game world. These expressions either directly provide texture coordinates, perform actions on existing ones, or output values useful for modifying coordinates. These nodes provide data related to positions and orientations in your 3D world. World position outputs the 3D position of the current pixel in world space, useful for planar mapping seamless textures across multiple meshes or calculating radial distances from the camera. Actor position world space outputs the world space position of the pivot point origin of the actor the material is applied to, useful for radial effects centered on an actor. Object position world space outputs the world space position of the pivot point of the specified mesh component, provides precise control for complex actors with multiple components. Object orientation outputs the world space orientation rotation of the object, useful for effects aligned with the object's rotation like wind or procedural textures. Object radius outputs a single float representing the radius of the output's bounding sphere in world space, handy for normalizing effects or creating distance-based effects from the object's edge. Camera and screen-based coordinates. These nodes provide information relative to the viewer's perspective and screen space. Camera position world space outputs the world space position of the camera, crucial for view-depending effects like calculating distances to the camera or creating Fresnel effects. Pixel normal world space outputs the world space normal vector of the current pixel after normal map details, core for lighting, also useful for triplanar mapping or flow maps. Screen position outputs normalized screen space coordinates 0 to 1 across the screen, useful for post-process effects, vignettes, or sampling render targets based on screen location. View size outputs a vector 2 containing the width and height of the current viewport in pixel, useful for normalizing custom screen space coordinates or adapting effects to resolution. UV and mesh-based coordinates. These nodes directly interact with the mesh UV channels or vertex data. Texture coordinate outputs the standard UV coordinates from the mesh vertex data, default UV channel 0. You can specify the coordinate index for other UV channels. This is the starting point for most texture mapping. Panner creates animated texture scrolling or movement. It takes a coordinate and time input controlled by speed X and speed Y, either for flowing water or moving clouds. Rotator rotates UV coordinates around a specified pivot. You can set a speed for continuous rotation, perfect for spinning textures or radial energy fields. Light map UVs outputs the UV coordinates designated for light maps, typically UV channel 1 or higher, used internally for static lighting or for specialized custom lighting effects. Vertex normal world space outputs the world space normal vector of the vertex before normal mapping, useful for aligning effects with base geometry or procedural texture generation based on the mesh shape. Particle system coordinates. These nodes are specific to materials applied to particle systems. Particle position world space outputs the world space position of the current particle, incredibly useful for particle effects that react to their exact location, like ground collision effects. And that concludes our tour of coordinates material expressions in Unreal Engine. From world positions and camera perspective to UV manipulation and particle-specific data, these nodes give you the power to define where and how your material effects manifest. Understanding and combining these expressions is key to creating dynamic and visually rich and spatially aware materials. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I really appreciate you taking the time to level up your craft. It means a lot. Stay sharp and stay creative. And I will see you in the next one.